Already saw you. Okay, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not Gregg Eisenberg. Yay! That's not good when you get a big applause for not being Gregg, but that's okay.
You don't know Gregg?
I am Eddie Goldstein. I am a good friend of Gregg's. And I wondered at first why Gregg asked me to do the introduction to this show tonight. And so I thought about it.
Get in the camera.
Oh, get in the camera. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
I am not Gregg Eisenberg. Okay, we did that part. So, yay! Am I in the camera now?
Yeah,
If you go behind the podium.
If I go behind the podium, then I'll be behind the podium. Okay.
No,
There we go.
No,
That's good.
good.
Hey guys,
There we go.
wait a minute.
Yes.
When Gregg comes out, mess with the camera and we'll figure it out. So I was trying to figure out why he asked me to do it. There's a lot of things that Gregg and I have in common. One is we're both professional performers, and I am a magician, and I also do science shows, and Gregg is what he calls a stand-up philosopher. So that's going to be exciting tonight. We're going to get some stand-up philosophy. That is one thing in common. We both grew up in Jewish houses and were surrounded by Jewish humor since we were little kids. One thing I think that Gregg does not know about me is in the 1970s, I used to work in the Catskill Mountains as a lifeguard. And so I used to, at the Browns Hotel, I used to be able to stay up late and see all of the greats. Henny Youngman, all of those Borscht Belt guys, I've seen them. And tonight I get to see Gregg. All right. It's good. One of my earliest memories, this is when I was a little kid, I was in Hebrew school and I got chosen to be in the school play. I come running home. I said, Mom, in the school play, I'm so excited. She gives me a big hug and says, what part did they give you? And I said, I have the role of the Jewish husband. And my mother said, you go back and tell that teacher you want a speaking part. So, oh, those are good when you get one of those, the laugh, and then there's the other laugh for the people who like didn't get it the first time.
That was a good one.
Okay, that's a good one.
There's the Jews.
So, enough about me. I want to talk a little bit about Gregg. Gregg is one of the most creative people that I know. How many people here know Gregg? I'm just curious. And so rather than me list the things that he's so creative, I want to have you folks say some of the things about Gregg that you know that show how creative he is.
Jewish.
He is Jewish, that is good. When you walk into his house, he's got stuff on the walls that's just like this most incredible artwork that's all over the place. Who can tell me something else creative about Gregg?
Music.
He is a musician. That's right. Not only does he play music, but he writes music. It's very cool. What else is about Gregg is very creative? Yes?
He's poetry in motion. He's always living it.
He is poetry in motion, always living it. I hope Gregg can hear. Oh, but he'll be able to see it on the video. If not, poetry in
He made a
motion.
video of one of his songs, I think in Europe, and it's like at some fountain making a video. He sent to me.
It's fabulous. You know how many people say, "I'm going to make a music video."
We don't need you, Gregg. And he's doing great. He's doing fine. No, wait, we want Eddie.
That's right. No. Okay,
You speak, Gregg.
I will move that back. Don't worry about it. She hasn't heard a word I've said. All she's been doing is making sure the camera is pointed in the right places. So we were talking about how creative you are. Who can tell me another creative thing about
He
Gregg?
wrote the book you're holding,
He wrote the...
which is the most creative and out of this world, out of your mind kind of writing. Like, who does that?
That's exactly right.
that's
How
what
many
he
people
did.
have a copy of this book? You are so in luck because if you want to buy one for somebody else, Gregg bought a bunch of them here tonight. So you are good. This, by the way, is was the #2 book on the Amazon comedy section. So it was fabulous. He has sold tens of thousands of these books, and you see them all over Boulder, so it is fabulous. This is in its 4th printing. That's because the first 3 were blurred, so they had to fix it up again. But that is good. And what he does is this is Letting Go is all we have to hold on to. You guys already know about this book, so it's fabulous. He does planetarium shows, multimedia shows. The Earth is Bipolar is one of the shows that he has done over there. How many people have seen that show? That is good. So this is a creative guy over here. He doesn't just sit and talk, he does all sorts of very cool things.
He's really a snappy dresser, too.
And a snappy dresser, that is right. But tonight is something different. Tonight is a new thing. I want to read exactly what Gregg wrote. Tonight is going to be an enlivening and edifying talk full of unexpected twists and turns. That is exciting. But there's something even better about this tonight. As you know, it is a crazy time in the world. And at particular, there's anti-Semitism in the world, in this country. There is a lot of conflicted thoughts, even amongst Jews like myself, with what Israel is doing and supporting Israel and stuff like that. And you would think somebody else might just go and say, I'm going to hide and not really express my Jewishness, not really express my Judaism. Gregg is doing the exact opposite. Gregg is saying, I am proud of my heritage, and I'm going to put a whole show together that is humor about my heritage. So it is awesome. Yeah. So right now, I would like to introduce a songwriter, a poet, a stand-up philosopher, a publisher, my friend, and the guy who has a speaking part tonight. Let's hear it for Follow Your Bris, Gregg Eisenberg. Hey, Eddie. Wait a minute.
Hey, how about applause for Eddie? He was great.
Okay. Okay, hang on.
Oh, I can move this.
Yeah,
Good?
that's good. Yeah.
Did you do the joke about the speaking part?
Yeah.
I did earlier.
Oh, it's in my script. Okay, that's all right. Well, I know to skip it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for that introduction. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, said, "No straight object was ever fashioned from the crooked timber of which man is made." And not only do I agree, I intend to demonstrate, using myself as an example, that this is 100% true. Human affairs do not proceed in straight lines. The narratives get away from us, and I am living proof. This is true individually and collectively. The narratives get away from us. Woody Allen captured it well when he said, "More than any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and hopelessness. The other leads to extinction. Let us pray we have the wisdom to choose wisely." People have claimed that Jews have historically lacked a sense of humor. British philosopher Alfred North Whitehead remarked in the late 1800s that Jews were singularly humorless. The historian Thomas Carlyle similarly asserted that Jews show not the slightest trace of humor. And George Eliot, a novelist, wrote, "The literature of the Hebrews gives us an idea of a people who went about their business and their pleasures as gravely as a society of beavers." That's rude. What does he have against beavers? Herman Adler, the chief rabbi of England back in Whitehead's day, did argue back, saying, "Nor did the Assyrians or Philistines possess any genius for comedy. And I doubt the illiterate barbarians of Northern Europe were known for their wit, even though they did have the last laugh after conquering Rome. And the ancient Mayans and Aztecs, who engaged in human sacrifice and human decapitation, weren't exactly a barrel of laughs to hang out with, though I've never gone down there to find out for myself." No, not to get too biblical on you on Shabbat. Even the God of the Jews was a kind of royal prankster. Like they say, If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. The Chinese are sometimes called the Jews of the East. Yeah, I'm not making that up. I make a lot of shit up. I'm not making that up. Why? Because they're scattered all over Asia. They're often minorities in those countries. They have a long history of being persecuted second-class citizens and being suspect of dual loyalties. They were, most of all, different. And so the story is told. No one knows if this conversation actually took place. But a Jewish man and a Chinese man were conversing. The Jewish man commented on what a wise people the Chinese were. Yes, replied the Chinese man, our culture is over 4,000 years old, but you Jews are very wise too. Thank you, said the Jew, and our culture is over 5,000 years old. That's impossible, said the Chinese man. Where did your people eat for the first 1,000 years?
Especially on Christmas.
Che Tui, baby, Che Tui. I'll see you there at 2 o'clock. Now, I want to make clear from the beginning that we're not going to talk about 3 things tonight. We're not going to talk about the UN partition plan of 1947 between India and Pakistan. It's too loaded. Please don't bring it up. We're trying to have a good time, okay? 2, we're not going to talk about the UN partition plan for Cyprus between Turkey and Greece, who both lay historical claim to it, by the way. It's too nuanced, and we're not going to touch it. And most of all, we're not going to talk about the 2-state solution that exists between Taiwan and China. We all know the Kuomintang came from China and took over Taiwan in 1948, and it breaks my heart. We're going to avoid the topic tonight. However, if you do want to talk about the fierce rivalry between Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia, I happen to be an expert on that subject. Both sides are really pissed off, and like me, I'm sure all of you agree, we just want to see everybody get along. On the subject of Asia, I love Eastern philosophy. My mind is somewhat steeped in Eastern philosophy, and I think it's fair to say I take an East meets West approach to life and to writing jokes. I feel my kundalini rise and fall every time Bitcoin goes up and down. I do some of my best thinking when I meditate. And as such, I take a somewhat Buddhist point of view of the world, but it's syncretic. It's a Buddhist-Jewish point of view. From the Buddhists, I take it that life is suffering, and the only way out of it is to follow the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. From the Jews, I also take that life is suffering, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's why in Chinese restaurants they give you fortune cookies, and in Jewish delis they give you misfortune cookies. I used to be heavily into Tibetan Buddhism. As many of you know, there's an entire university here in Boulder dedicated to it. But lately I've become even more fascinated with Mongolian barbecue. So what is quintessentially Jewish? According to Devorah Baum, a professor in the UK, whom I actually met last fall, it is being at odds with oneself. I will elaborate on that theory later. It's something I know a lot about. To be Jewish, according to Baum, is to feel pride in one's difference and feeling ashamed of it at the same time. It is to be the favorite child and the black sheep in the family at the same time. A laugh of recognition, I see. It is to live in a state of contradiction. And this starts to get a little Freudian, which is always a little sexy. But insofar as Freud's concept of neurosis was centered around the conflicting feelings that the individual or patient could not get closure on, the Oedipal conflict being the big one. It was the idea that the individual is being pulled in 2 contradictory directions at the same time. And the inability to cope with that tension is what gives rise to neuroticism. This is something else I know a lot about from personal experience. And yes, I have written The Idiot's Guide to Neurotic Bipolarity. I can prove to anyone who will listen that there's a strong relationship between cognitive dissonance and a sense of humor. Now, one theory is that the Jewish collective psyche suffers from the grandest cognitive dissonance of all time. Throughout history, both in Europe and in the Middle East, we understood ourselves to be chosen among all nations through the revelation that happened at Mount Sinai when 200,000 of us were there to witness it, chosen to carry the burden of the law. If you're not Jewish, believe me, it's nothing you really want to get mixed up in. Yet at the same time, our history was one of almost relentless homelessness, subjugation, and persecution. Chosen people, dispossessed by God. Talk about the narrative getting away from you. How are you supposed to wrap your mind around that kind of contradiction? Jews are people for whom I like to say have too many ironies in the fire. Two things are moving in opposite directions at the same time in our minds and in the real world almost all the time. So to be a Jew, in my working definition, is to be the one whose narrative got away from him, the story he was trying to tell himself and others about who he is and what his destiny is, ultimately intertwined with a reality that was beyond his control. And this is true again on an individual and on a collective basis. Now, every family has its Jew. That's my new shtick. It's fun to say. You got to say it sometime. Everyone said, every family has its Jew. Now, before I go all Lenny Bruce on you, let me explain. Because maybe to be Jewish is to be different. You know how you say someone's a little different? If you're a little different, you very well may be the Jew in your family. You don't have to convert to be a Jew. You may already be there. And it's not a religious thing in this definition. It's a characterological thing. I'm not saying it's logical. It's characterological. It's about positioning. Perfect. That's just right where I wanted that position. There we go. It's about positioning. When you are, a little different, you're at odds with society, at odds with your family, and ultimately at odds with yourself. And all of this is very Jewy. Rabbi Kaufman and his friend Goldstein were sitting in a coffee house in Berlin in 1935. Rabbi, his friend said, "I notice you're reading Der Stürmer, the Nazi newspaper. I can't understand why. A Nazi paper that libels the Jews? Are you some kind of masochist? Or even worse, a self-hating Jew?" On the contrary, Goldstein, when I read the Jewish newspapers, all I learn about are pogroms, riots in Palestine, and people leaving the faith in America. But when I read Der Stürmer, I see that Jews control all the banks, dominate the arts, and are about to take over the entire world. This news makes me feel a lot better. Not long after that conversation, they could overhear the conversation at the next table. Did you hear that the Jews sunk the Titanic? The Jews, I thought it was an iceberg. Iceberg, Goldberg, Eisenberg, they're all the same. Did you see that coming?
No.
Okay, that's good.
No, I didn't see it.
I shouldn't ask in the middle, but the story of the Jews is we were once in a state of harmony with God, but because of our own weakness of character, namely our desire for knowledge, ostensibly carnal knowledge, we were expelled from the Garden of Eden. That was, it turns out, the first of many expulsions. Now we live outside of Eden, and furthermore, because of our subsequent even worse behavior, we've been driven off our homeland and forced to live scattered around the world as a perennial outsider. We breached the original contract. So we're both insiders and outsiders, and it's a little crazy making. Like most of the jokes in my book, it's a case of two things moving in opposite directions at the same time, in the same sentence, and you can't get closure. Now, one theory is that Jews use humor as a coping mechanism to heal or address centuries of persecution, centuries of irony. The idea is that Jews are of two minds about everything, and they use humor to cope. Just a big coping mechanism. Later, I'm going to challenge that theory and present a different point of view. Mendel the baker, is walking to his store when a stranger runs up to him and punches him in the face and says, "That's for you, Joseph." Mendel is surprised and starts to laugh. The stranger says, "Why are you laughing? Do you want me to punch you again?" Mendel says, "Oh no, it's just that the joke's on you. I'm not Joseph, I'm Mendel." Two Jews are in front of a firing squad, awaiting their execution. As they stand there, the leader of the firing squad asks them, "Do either of you have any questions?" The first Jew says, "There's been a terrible mistake." His friend quickly turns to him and says, "Herman, shut up, don't make any trouble." Just want to let that one sink in for a second.
Don't make any trouble.
Don't make any trouble. In my own life, I didn't start writing jokes until around the age of 40. That's when, according to Jewish halacha or law, people can start studying Kabbalistic texts. As many of you, now if you know me at all, you know I love texts. And like I say in my book, I would give you my undivided attention, but I feel it would be rude to the person I'm texting with. Now, I have a theory that people become funny when they reach a certain crossroads in life where the narrative of who they are or how something was supposed to go has gotten away from them so much that there's so many ironies in the fire that they reach a point where it's either laugh or cry. Or like I called my last talk in this very room, sit or get off the cushion. In Exodus, God says to the Jews, again, not to ruin your Friday night, "I've set before thee life and death. Choose life." Now he or she or they could have just as easily said, well, I don't think you can say they in monotheism. He could have just as easily said, "I set before thee tears or laughter. Choose laughter." Young boy was standing in the lobby of his temple looking at the wall of plaques and with people's names on it. Some of the names had flags next to them. The boy didn't understand. The rabbi sees the boy standing there and walks over. "You look perplexed, my son," he says. "What do all these flags mean?" asked the boy. "Oh," the rabbi said, "those are all the people who died in service." The boy continued to look perplexed. He thinks for a moment, then looks up and asks the rabbi, "Which service, Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur?" A lot of Jews emigrated to the U.S. before World War I. Two of them met on a street corner in Brooklyn who hadn't seen each other in quite a while. And this is a true story. The first one says, "Hey, Shlomo, how have you been?" Shlomo says, "Not bad." "Mordechai, how about you?" He says, "To be honest, I've been sick for 3 months, and you know what? It's cost me over $400 to treat it." "Oh," replied Shlomo, "in the old country on money like that, you could be sick for a year." Now, a lot of Jewish immigrants in New York City were granted dairy farms in northern New York State to help reduce the intense congestion in New York and also to help them get their new lives started. John Deere started building tractors in the 30s and 40s, and to promote their farming equipment, they used to put on big annual conventions. One of these Jewish farmers attends a convention and at lunchtime is seated next to a farmer from Texas. It's almost funny right there. "How big is your farm?" asks the Texan. "Oh," the Jew sits up and says with pride, "My farm is so big, I can start walking at 8 a.m. and I won't reach the other side till noon." "How big is your farm?" Oh, the Texan leans up in his chair and says, kind of bragging, "I can start driving at 8 a.m. and not reach the other side till 6 p.m. "Ach," says the Jew, "I understand. I had a car like that once." woman is riding a bus in the Midwest when a man sits down next to her. He's wearing a black hat, a long black coat, black trousers, has a long curly beard, and is muttering some kind of prayer under his breath. She kind of hisses at him. It's people like you that give the rest of us a bad name. What do you mean, he says. Look at you, dressed in black, never take off your hat, always muttering old prayers under your breath. It's Jews like you that give the rest of us a bad name. I beg your pardon, ma'am. I'm not Jewish. I'm Amish. Oh, she says, how darling is that? You've kept your old customs. Yeah, there's a lot in a joke like that. I'm not going to deconstruct it for you. Just enjoy it. Now, a bris, for those of you who don't know or have somehow been shielded from such information, is, in its most basic form, here we go, ready? A male circumcision. Okay. But everything in Judaism has multiple levels of meaning. Some words or actions have 36 different levels of meaning, which is why Jews perfected the art of restless mind syndrome long before the modern theory of neurosis was invented. It's almost impossible to overthink anything if you're Jewish. Now, the ritualized circumcision happens on the child's 8th day. Why on day 8, you may ask? There are 8 days of Passover, 8 days of Hanukkah. This is actually the 5th night of Passover, if I'm not mistaken. And then Hanukkah's coming up, only 186 shopping days left. So why do we wait 8 days before giving the kid the cut? Well, let's think about the possibilities for a second. To give the kid a week reprieve, to give him a chance to claim his pronouns. Because they used to keep new mothers in the hospital for a week, and it's a ceremony better done at home. Because it would be inhumane on day 3 or 4. Because 8 is the kid's lucky number. In Kabbalah, the school of Jewish mysticism, 8 is all of our lucky number. It's the number of new beginnings. The 7-day work week is over. God's rested for a day. He feels refreshed. The moon has gone through a quarter of its cycle. A fresh new week is beginning. And hey, the conditions are right. Or as I like to say, it's time the kid puts some foreskin in the game. But a bris is so much more than just a snip. It's considered the final act of perfection to God's creation. It puts the final touches on an otherwise perfect form. And as such, it's the moment a boy becomes Jewish. It is the entry ticket. It makes you an official member of the tribe. You're marked for life. There will be little confusion going forward. But on the highest level of meaning, bris means destiny. And as such, it makes a boy party to the covenant, the great covenant between God and the Jewish people. It is literally the boy's signature on the contract, signed in blood. Well, by allowing this piece of flesh to be cut, I hereby agree to take on the blessings and burdens of being Jewish and to follow the laws of Abraham. There's no option for electronic signatures in this case. So when I call this talk Follow Your Bris, I'm really saying follow your destiny. For myself, I can say I was circumcised according to rules that were circumscribed in the Bible under circumstances that could not be circumvented. I was
You say that again.
I was circumcised under rules, according to rules that were circumscribed in the Bible under circumstances that could not be circumvented.
How fast can you say it?
Let's all say it together. I visited my mother a few weeks ago. It was my birthday, and she gave me 2 ties, a blue one and a red one. So I go into the room, I get dressed, I come out with a coat wearing the blue one, and she snaps at me, "What, the red one you don't like?" Glad you didn't take that one. Now, some people are half Jewish, and I call them semi-Semites. And there are 2 kinds of semi-Semites. Because Judaism is traditionally matrilinear. If your mother's Jewish, but your father isn't, you'd be accepted by the Jews as Jewish, and you'd be hunted down by your persecutors for being Jewish too. It's tough. It's tough out there. But if your mother's not Jewish, but your father is, that's the worst of both worlds. You won't be accepted by the Jews as Jewish, but never mind, you'd still be hunted by your persecutors. Feel sorry for those guys. Now, unlike most religions, Jews don't seek converts. How out of step is that with capitalism? It's not the growth model. Christians are always proselytizing. Islamists want the whole world to be Muslim. Microsoft wants everyone to use their software. But there's a long history of Jews needing to convert to Christianity or pretending to just to survive. 4 Jews who converted to Christianity were trading stories about why they converted. First one explains that he was a victim of a false accusation and converted to escape the harsh sentence he would have received. The second one talked about how Jews were discriminated against in his field of work and he would have better professional futures if he converted. Third one gave a rambling account of how he fell in love with a Gentile and needed to convert to appease her parents. The fourth one said he converted out of a firm conviction that Christianity is a religion of a higher order. Oh, please, the others interrupted him. Save that for your Gentile friends. I was curious about that one. Moshe and Tevye and Herb are down on their luck. The economy's been down and they have almost no money. But every day they walk by and see a big sign in the church that says, convert to Christianity and get paid 200 rubles. They've passed the sign many times, but none of them want to do it. But finally, Herb is so hungry, he says to his friends, I'm going to go in there and do this. The others are astonished and wish him luck. So Herb walks into the big church while his friends wait outside. An hour goes by, 2 hours go by, 3 hours go by. Finally, Herb comes out wearing a little wooden cross on his neck, looking rather pleased. So how did it go, Moshe and Tevye ask. How did it go? Did you get the money? He snaps at them. Is that all you people think about?
Well.
But there are people who convert to Judaism. Ivanka Trump converted to Orthodox Judaism to marry Jared in 2009. We just read up on that. So a recent convert to Judaism was chatting with his Jewish friend and told him, I'm getting an operation tomorrow. Oh, what are they going to do? Circumcise me? Oh, I had my bris when I was 8 days old. Did it hurt? Asked his friend. I couldn't walk for a year. How are we doing?
Oh, I hurt.
The question of home figures strongly in the Jewish psyche. Where do we belong? Where don't we belong? Do we have a home? Has it appreciated? We are mnemonic people, not demonic. Mnemonic. It means we remember. We remember thousands of years of history that we have, that we identify with. Is it good to have such a strong memory? Maybe not. George Burns once said, the secret to happiness is good health and a bad memory. Now, I'm not sure other ethnic groups hold on to their memories so strongly. Like, take the Irish, for example. They fled their homeland en masse during the Great Potato Famine about 150 years ago. Millions of them came to the New World. Now, if they were like the Jews, they'd be talking about Ireland and praying to go back almost every day. They'd still be here in 2,000 years from now, praying every day to go back. They'd still be saying in 4025 AD, next year may we return to Dublin. Every year it'd be the same song. We got to get back to Ireland. We got to get back to Dublin. The rest of it would be like, go already. Don't talk about it for 2,000 years. What's wrong with you? So the first big event in my life was the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I guess being born probably before that. But then after that was the assassination of... That was on day 1. And then on day 8, they put a drop of wine on my tongue and circumcised me. I had no power. I had no free will. And the laws around this ritual are ancient. It's like signing on the bottom line. It's a contractual relationship. Jewish men have a contractual relationship with the creator of the universe. I wonder who their legal counsel was when all that was negotiated. I wonder if God needed outside counsel. That's still a question. Of course we're tough negotiators. We cut our teeth on the Lord Almighty. Teacher asks her kindergarten class, "What's 2 + 2?" 5-year-old Jewish kid said, "It depends." The teacher said, "Depends on what?" "It depends. What are we doing? Buying or selling?" Hate to reinforce stereotypes. The astronomer was finishing his lecture by saying, "And so most scientists believe the sun will die out in about 6 billion years." "How many years did you say?" asked Mrs. Goldberg. 6 billion. "Phew," she said, "I thought you said 6 million." Learning how to see the positive in any situation is part of the art of humor. Learning how to see the flip sides of things. 2 Jews are about to be shot. Suddenly the order comes to hang them instead. One smiles to the others and says, "See, they're running out of bullets." Gallows humor. Jews have got to be the most expelled people in all of world history. It's another first. We've been expelled from Spain, France, England, Russia. The first expulsion was by the Babylonians. Think about it, like if you're a student and you do something bad, you get in trouble, you get sent to the principal's office. Some people get detentions. They have to sit in detention for half a day. Some people get suspended for 2 or 3 days. But Jews, we get expelled. Jews were expelled from France twice, England 3 times, Italy 3 times, Germany 4 times, Poland, Turkey, and of course Spain and Portugal. We would probably win the prize for most expulsions. We are a wandering people, exiled for most of recorded history. I think we would probably prefer to use the expression well-traveled. We're well-traveled seasoned travelers. But by virtue of having to think on our feet and survive in multiple societies and speak multiple languages, we became rather cosmopolitan. So don't blame us if we're quick on the study. Don't call us shifty or conniving. Don't blame us if we learn things fast, if we're adaptable, versatile, and cosmopolitan. Don't blame us if we're quick on the uptake, fast as heck, and first to market. We're seasoned world travelers. They made us this way. We probably would have been content remaining in backwater villages, praying one day to return to Jerusalem to a God that doesn't really listen to us. We would have been content speaking our own language, living in our own shtetls, and dedicating our lives to prayer. So don't blame us if we're cosmopolitan, have friends all over the world, and are a step ahead of the pack. The discovery of the New World, which is where we are tonight in case anyone wasn't sure, is also bound up with Jewish history. There were roughly 200,000 Jews living in Spain in the late 1400s, and they were among the most prestigious members of society. Ferdinand's doctor was Jewish, and he was a major Jew. Whatever that means. Ferdinand, it doesn't mean anything.
In the military?
No, he was not. Ferdinand didn't really want to expel the Jews, and his doctor tried to dissuade him, but when he married Isabella, he had no choice. So the expulsion decree was issued on April 30th, 1492. We're about to celebrate the anniversary. It's said that by August 1, 1492, all the Jews had to go. They had to leave Spain. And there was no Uber back then. No GPS, no smartphones, no UPS, no shipping things ahead. Now what's interesting is that the 3 ships led by Christopher Columbus set sail on August 3rd, 1492. It really does stand to reason that some Jews were on those ships. Like butterflies, Jews are a migratory species. We go to Florida in the winter, back to New York in the summer. Teacher asks her class, who's the most important person in history? And whoever gets the answer right gets a box of lollipops. One student said it was George Washington. Nope, said the teacher. Good guess, but it's not George Washington. Another student said Martin Luther King. Good guess. That's not correct either. Finally, one of the Jewish students said, Jesus Christ. That's right, she said. Come on up and get your bag of lollipops. Jesus Christ, his Jewish friends asked him after school, how could you say that? Look, he said, I know it's Moses, you know it's Moses, but business is business.
Oh. Too honest.
I know it's Moses, come on. Speaking of expulsions, how can you be expelled more than once from the same place? Let's talk about that for a second. That doesn't make any sense at all. The reason is, a lot of times, during periods of economic distress, Jews were invited back. Yeah, that's how to places like Poland and Ukraine to help boost the economy. But then once wealth was built back up, they kick the Jews out again and steal their money again. How many times can this cycle repeat? It's like expel me once, shame on you. Expel me twice, shame on me.
It's good. It's really
Thanks.
good.
I added that today. And here's something else I just learned the other day that might seem off topic, but it's not. Back in 2007, the United States and the Eurozone had fairly similar gross domestic products. The economies were roughly the same size. Now, 15 or 17 years later, the US GDP is twice as big as the Eurozone. We've done great. Americans should be more optimistic. But I also learned that if the UK became the 51st state of the United States, if the UK joined the US, which would be massively ironic, but if it did become the 51st state, in terms of per capita income, it would rank, drum roll please, 51,
Wow.
lower than Mississippi.
What?
You know what the UK's problem is, don't you? Not enough Jews. I was really curious how that was going to go. There's only two, but I researched this stuff. There are only 200, restless mind syndrome. There was only 277,000 Jews in the UK compared to our 7.5 million. But to test that theory, I looked up how many Jews are there in Mississippi. Only 12,295. And one of them just converted to baptism for $20. So now they're down to 12,294. I just added that today too. So maybe my theory is wrong, but you'd think with 277,000 Jews that the UK could do better than be the 51st state. But then I looked at percentages. Jews compose 0.2% of Mississippi. That's 1 out of 500. And they compose 0.5% in England. That's 1 out of 200. Maybe my theory is bogus. In Colorado, today, or yesterday, I don't know which it is, there are 98,401 Jews. That's 1.8% of the population, or almost 1 in 50 And Colorado ranks, drumroll please, in terms of per capita income, 15 in the United States. I'm going with my theory is bogus. But I did a little more research. If Israel were the 51st state, and some people say it already is, it would rank, what do you think? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Israel, in terms of per capita GDP, would come in at 40, just below Oklahoma and just above Montana. And they got a lot of Jews in Israel. Okay, so that blows up my theory completely. One thing about the interesting thing about the economy of Colorado that I can tell you is that for many years, the economy of Colorado was based on gold mining and gold milling. And that was true until relatively recently. But now the economy of Colorado is largely based on marijuana production. The good thing about that is the Denver Nuggets don't have to change their name. So glad I worked that one in somehow. I had to find a way to get that in there. That was one of my first jokes ever, actually. Immigrants have to learn how to speak English correctly. Yeah, the Denver Nuggets are good to go. The immigrants have to learn how to speak English correctly, and certain words are difficult. There's the famous story of one immigrant asking the other, "How do you pronounce it correctly, Abe? Is it Hawaii or Hawaii?" "It's Hawaii," said Abe. "Thanks," said the first one, and Abe said rather proudly, "You're welcome." That, I happen to know, just as a piece of trivia, is Philip Roth's favorite joke. So, if you're ever on a game show now, you know. Yankel comes home from school and tells his mother, "Oh, he got a part in the school play." "Wonderful," says his mother. "What part of it? Yankel, I get to play the part of a Jewish." His mother scowls at him and says, "Go back until you want a speaking part." That reminds me of one of Rodney Dangerfield's jokes. He said, "I didn't speak to my wife for 2 years. I didn't want to interrupt her." It's good to have a follow-up sometimes. Benny is almost 32 years old and still not married. He dates and dates but can't seem to find the one. His friend finally asks him, "What's wrong, Benny? Are you looking for the perfect woman? Are you really that fussy you can't find a suitable bride?" Benny replies, "Well, actually, I meet many nice girls that I like, but as soon as I bring them home to meet my parents, my mother just doesn't like them, so I keep looking." "Okay, look," says his friend, "I have an idea. Try to find a girl who's more like your mother." A couple weeks later, they meet again, so he asks his friend, "How has it gone? Have you found a girl like your mother?" Benny shrugs. "Yes, I found a girl who's a lot like my mother, and my mother loves her." "Congratulations," his friend said. "So are you dating her?" "I'm afraid not. My father can't stand her."
You don't want to support that,
You let that one settle in. All of them are good. Two rabbis in California in the 60s were discussing the decline in moral values. I mean, said one, "I didn't sleep with my wife before we were married. How about you?" "I don't know," said the second one. "What was her maiden name?" The 60s, I missed them. Would have been good, would have been good. Hyman was a lecturer in home economics at the local college. He told his students a personal story. "I watched my wife's routine at breakfast for years. She was so slow. She made a lot of trips from the refrigerator to the oven, to the sink, to the counter, just carrying one thing at a time. So I told her, 'Honey, why don't you carry several things at once?'" "Did it save time?" asked one of the students. "Actually, yes. She used to take 20 minutes to make breakfast. Now I get it done in 7.
Yeah.
It was mealtime on an El Al flight to Tel Aviv. The flight attendant came to Moshe and asked him if he would like dinner. What are my choices, he asked. Yes or no, she said. Israelis have a reputation of being rude, but I think they prefer to think of it as being direct. Now, in the 1960s, which I already told you I missed, because of the oil crisis, there was a major drop in global agricultural production. And that is true. Representatives came to Vienna from all over the world to form a committee to discuss the problem. On the tarmac, a group of journalists saw a Russian, an American, and an Israeli delegate of the committee. So one of the journalists ran up to them and said, "Excuse me, what do you think of the meat shortage?" The Russian said, "What's meat?" The American said, "What's a shortage?" And the Israeli said, "What's excuse me?"
You've traveled.
It was the evening of December 24th. What's excuse me? You gotta love that. Remember that one. Like, y'all are in situations where you need a good joke, but you have to set it up with the joke before, because people don't know. I don't know, maybe you don't have to know. Excuse me, what do you think of the meat shortage? Oh, what's meat? Okay, I'm on the next one. It was the evening of December 24th, and El Al Flight 206 to Tel Aviv is landing on time. The pilot comes on the intercom and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, El Al Flight 206 is landing on time. Please remain in your seats until we've crossed the tarmac," and it pulled up to the gate and turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. "Thank you so much for your cooperation." A minute later, he comes back on the intercom and says, "And to those of you who are still in your seats, Merry Christmas." Happy Hanukkah. A young newlywed couple living in Poland felt a lot of financial stress. They just couldn't get ahead, so they asked one of their friends, "How do you do this? How do you get ahead?" Their friend explained to them, "First, you buy a cow and feed the cow well, and when the cow is 2 years old, bring in a bowl and let them, do the thing and get the cow pregnant, and soon you'll have 2 cows. And then you'll do the same thing a few times, bring in a bowl, and in a few years you'll have 3 or 4 cows. That's how you build wealth." So they gave it a try. They bought a cow, fed her for 2 years, got her ready, and they brought the bull in. But when they brought the bull in, the cow refused to have sex with him. This happened over and over and over again. They didn't know what to do, and they were running out of money. So they went to the rabbi, the only learned man in their shtetl, in their village, and told him the story. "Every time we bring in the bull, she refuses to mate with him." The rabbi thinks for a while and then asks them, "Did you buy your cow in Minsk?" "Why, yes, we did, Rabbi. How did you know?" He looked at them rather sheepishly. "My wife is from Minsk."
No.
Groucho Marx wanted to join a family-oriented swimming club in New York in the 1930s, but this was one of many clubs which at that time did not accept Jews as members. At first, Groucho was infuriated. He went back to his car, slammed the door where his daughter was waiting, sat there thinking. But then he got an idea and walked back in, and he said to the manager, "Look, my daughter's only half Jewish. Let's make a deal. You let us join the club, and she'll only go into the pool up to her waist." That's very Groucho. That's authentic. That's... Hanoch is driving around Jerusalem. He's late for a meeting and failing to find a parking spot. In desperation, he looks up to heaven and says, Lord, if you find me a parking spot, I promise to eat only kosher, respect all the holidays, and keep the Sabbath. Miraculously, spot opens up right in front of him. He turns his face up to heaven and says, never mind, I just found one. A guy goes to confession and tells the priest, after a lifetime of good deeds and complete respectability, he finds himself having an affair with two married women half his age. When the priest urges him to seek Jesus' forgiveness, he replies that he can't do that because he's Jewish. Then why on earth are you telling me, bemoaned the priest. I'm telling everyone, he says. Rachel comes home and finds her husband in bed with a woman. Not just any woman, but her best friend. Instead of reprimanding him, she turns to her girlfriend and says, me, I have to, but you? It's year 2028, and the first Jewish candidate for U.S. president has won. He's making preparations for the inauguration on the lawn in front of the Capitol. He calls his mother and says, Mom, I won the election. You got to come to the inauguration. She says, how can I come? I live all the way in New York. I'm not coming. He says, Mom, I'm going to be president of the United States. I can send Air Force One to pick you up. But what am I going to wear, she bucks? What am I going to wear? Because, Mom, I'm going to be president of the USA. I have tailors and aides that will help you get a dress. But where am I going to stay? Mom, I can get you a room in the White House. Okay, she agreed. I'll come. So it's inauguration day. Her son is getting sworn in. And she says to the person next to him, see that guy with one hand on the Bible and the other hand in the air? His brother's a doctor. There's some funny one-liners I have from some of these funny Jewish comedians, like Joan Rivers on house cleaning. If God wanted us to bend over, he would have put diamonds on the floor. George Burns once said, I don't deserve this award, but I have arthritis too, and I don't deserve that either. Rodney Dangerfield. I told my father I was going to go skating on the lake, and he said, why don't you wait till it warms up a little? I already did. I didn't talk to my wife for 2 years. I didn't want to interrupt her. I'll do it. Sarah Silverman has an edgy joke. I was raped by a doctor, which is so bittersweet for a Jewish girl. I did it. I did it.
Oh. It took her explaining it to me.
Is everybody okay? Everybody all right? Milton Berle. Jews don't drink because it interferes with their suffering. Where is it? I ordered a beer anyway, but I guess it's not coming. Sam Levinson. Insanity is hereditary. You get it from your children. Now, in the end, I don't believe Jews are funny because we've been persecuted, and humor is just a big coping mechanism for all the pain and gobsmacking irony that is built into our history. I don't think that. I think it's because we're people of the book. And by the book, I mean, of course, the Tao Te Ching. No, wait. I mean the Talmud, the book of Jewish law. The Talmud is the centerpiece of Jewish study, and it is a massive encyclopedia of different interpretations of things. It's different rabbis arguing different points. It's a form of discourse. The Talmud is not an old text. It's a living conversation among countless rabbis spanning countless generations, arguing over all the different ways you can look at the same thing. And I think having a sense of humor is nothing more than exercising this skill. And there's almost nothing more pleasurable for an overworked Jewish mind like mine than trying to see things from as many different angles as possible and trying to find the funny. My grandfather was self-employed. He was a musician. He was a vaudeville musician. One day in 1942, my accordion-playing grandfather, Harry Burke, took the family, including my 13-year-old dad, out to California to try to make it in LA. He changed his name from Eisenberg to Burke because Eisenberg was, different. My dad said he remembered there were a couple good gigs, not great gigs, in some jazz clubs in West LA. But about 2 weeks after they got there, what happened? Pearl Harbor was bombed in Hawaii, completely wiping out the entire U.S. fleet, Pacific Fleet, and the state of California and the entire West Coast went into a state of panic. People were freaking out, venues were closing, people were leaving the coast, and so my dad's family did too. Before long, they headed back to Chicago, which is where my dad finished high school and then Roosevelt University, and where later, after serving in Korea, he met my mother in a literature class on Navy Pier on Lake Michigan. Sometimes I ponder, if my grandfather had one more good gig, one more decently paid gig in some jazz club, maybe the family would have stayed in California, my parents would have never met, and I wouldn't be here right now in this room tonight. And the funny thing about that is, neither would you. So, I had this, I had a great paragraph, but it's not there. But we're so intertwined, and fate unfolds in ways that we really do not comprehend and cannot comprehend. And the great American novelist Saul Bellow said, in Jewish stories, laughing and trembling are so curiously intermingled that it's not easy to determine the relation between the two. So that ends my talk tonight. Thank you very much. But I have more. And but the thing's not in there. Oh, it is. Oh, great. I want to play some songs, a medley for you. So I'm gonna need my phone for that. Goodbye, Greg.